Accordia, dear friends, may I say how delighted I am to have the opportunity to join you, even if it has to be virtually, for the launch of what is a most important conference, examining and reflecting as it does on the position of Irish travellers in Ireland across the past 100 years. It is particularly apt that this conference takes place on International Traveller and Roma Day, a day which invites us to reflect on the many challenges still facing Roma and travellers and the strategies necessary to meet those challenges. The distinctive history, identity and tradition of Irish travellers is woven deeply into the story and culture of Ireland, and it has made a significant and positive contribution to Irish society. For so many generations, Mincéirs were a familiar and welcome sight in Irish towns and villages as they offered labour to our farmers, offered their skills in the rearing and selling of horses, mending and restoring household objects, and bringing to our doors for sale or exchange a range of beautifully crafted objects such as lace and paper flowers. It is to those basic, so close to nature communities, such as the travelling community, that we owe a special debt. It is they who have brought music, song and dance surviving into our homes and our shared public spaces today. It is impossible to overestimate the profound contribution they've made to our musical heritage, including, of course, our now UNESCO-recognised unique piping tradition. Indeed, some of the greatest musicians of our contemporary times, singers and dancers, come from our traveller community. Performers such as Finbar Fury, Margaret Barry, Johnny Doran, and Thomas McCarthy, who I had the pleasure of hearing sing at the launch of NUIG's Traveller Ethnicity Day celebrations at the end of February. These performers have been keeping our distinct music and song alive and relevant, and they have brought it to places far beyond Irish shores. The decision by our state just a few years ago, and indeed after a long struggle, to acknowledge the traveller community as an indigenous ethnic minority was a welcome one. There remains, however, very significant ground to cover and many changes, not just to state policy, but its implementation to be made if we are to resource, enable and achieve full participation for a significant group of our citizens who are regularly excluded from so many areas of society. Today's conference is part of the Decade of Centenaries programme, during which we commemorate the seminal events that led to, accompanied or succeeded the founding moments of the Irish state. This is a decade during which we must consider how we have used the hard-won independence that is our legacy. Ask ourselves as to whether we have lived up to the dreams and ideals for which they who founded our state sacrificed so much. A true republic must be built on principles and policies, surely ones which recognize the common welfare. Such recognition must also comprise an understanding that democracy is never static, is always and must be a work in progress, evolving in a way that includes and respects all of its citizens in all of their diversities. Be a republic that is leaving no one behind, is on a constant onward journey towards new futures and new possibilities. Féidearthachtaí nua, that are to be shared and celebrated together, le chéile. Across the world, we have witnessed many nomadic and indigenous groups being put under pressure, indeed forced, to embrace new and what are suggested modern ways of living that contradict their culture. They have been pushed and commanded to conform to a uniform approach, to define concepts such as nationality, home, nature, and human settlement. Ireland is sadly no exception. Our transition from predominantly agriculture to an industrial or service economy has brought to the travelling community some of the most difficult challenges. The erosion of their traditional roles and their consequent forced move to urbanised areas for housing, led to increased attempts by the state to fade their past practices and culture from national memory. Their distinctive nomadic lifestyle, which had so enriched our shared heritage, was put at risk. That desire to completely ignore, indeed seek to eliminate, a critical element of our past and to pressure travellers to assimilate into mainstream Irish society continues to be a shameful, unwelcome chapter in our nation's history. The report of the Commission on Itineracy of 1963 had clearly identified the travelling community as a problem. Its main recommendation and objective was of ensuring travellers would be absorbed into the general and settled community which was perceived as superior. It was paternalistic and it was ill-informed. Almost 60 years on from the publication of that report, we witness today some important changes. But yet, a republic that continues to push an integral and valuable group of citizens who, in the words of the Constitution that underpins our society, are entitled to be cherished equally, onto the margins of that society. Such marginalisation and exclusion is a daily part of the life for a community that is forced not just to battle to retain a culture now deemed to be in conflict with the norms and standards of a new and modern Ireland, but for basic rights in areas such as housing, health and education. Our Ireland is one that continues to grievously fail our travelling community, and the stark statistics speak for themselves. For example, the unacceptable gap between educational attainments by members of the travelling community and members of the settled community, the high rates of unemployment within the travelling community, the disproportionate number of travellers who are part of our prison population, the lower life expectancy, higher mortality rates and higher suicide rates associated with the lives of travellers, form a litany of indictments on a so-called republic whose state policies have so badly let down our traveller community. The facts are there for all of us to see. I recently visited Carrow Brown halting site in Galway and met with families who have had for many years been living in substandard conditions and continue to do so. A few days later, the Council of Europe reiterated their views on the deplorable conditions in which many of our travellers are forced to live. The Council of Europe has expressed concern that no work had been done on implementing appropriate recommendations to increase national oversight on the delivery of traveller accommodation. As a society, we should be profoundly embarrassed by such a failure of state policy, which has seen the financialisation of housing for speculative short and long-term gain, housing as a commodity, while large numbers of citizens are deprived of that most basic of human rights, a safe and secure place that they can call home. Such exclusionary policies are the antithesis of any concept of democracy or indeed of any true definition of a republic. If we are to reclaim that title, to justifiably call ourselves a Republic of Ireland, we must, as citizens, cease to tolerate the degree of exclusion and neglect that exists in our society, the creation and perpetuation of groups who are marginalised and vulnerable, and the development of policies that fail to address, indeed so often enable, social exclusion. As we reflect on 100 years of independence, we must do so honestly, taking into account our failures as well as our achievements, resolving to address them as we continue the ongoing work of crafting a democracy, accepting, celebrating, and most importantly, resourcing and enabling the traveller identity, heritage, and culture that is written so deeply into our nation's story, are the tools by which we can defeat prejudice, discrimination, and the ignorant stereotyping of the traveller community. At this point, may I commend Dr. Deirdre Hardiman and Dr. Helen Casey on being chosen as the recipients of this year's Michael McDonough Award for Traveller Ally Excellence. This award, named after the late Michael McDonagh, who worked so generously and tirelessly on behalf of his community, is a moving and appropriate statement of National University of Ireland Galway's commitment to inclusion and diversity, and to supporting staff who show leadership and example in relation to the advancement of travellers' rights in many areas, including education. Doctors Hardiman and Casey have demonstrated those qualities most impressively. I thank them for their spirit of solidarity and shared humanity. May I also congratulate Jason Sherlock, who has been honoured with lifetime membership of the Mincéirs Higgins Society, a much-deserved recognition. And may I thank John Cunningham, my former colleague, a historian who is doing so much for a historiography that is inclusive and scholarly in his view from below, and indeed all those who have been involved in bringing this conference to fruition, and those who, in various capacities, work so hard to improve the landscape for our travelling community. I include among those Owen Ward, who is NUIG's first full-time traveller education officer, and President Ciarán O'Hogatig, Mila Buikas, who is such a strong advocate of traveller access to education, and all of your good selves who, by your attendance at this conference, are making a significant statement of your wish and desire to proactively work to create a better and fairer world, one that might meet the criteria of a real republic. May I wish you every success in your important work. Guim gagra agus bannacht ar an obair a megar siúl agi, sin cógáilte agus don tácaí. Berbana.